this.
Oh,
Yeah.
for today is this appropriate?
Yeah. I think they follow really close to, you know, what I put in there. So.
I have to apologize this year.
Oh, you did? I didn't
The
even catch
moment I
that.
said, I was like, ooh.
Usually I catch those, but our current president, actually, when she was interviewing, she did that. And we all thought, oh, she's not going to get the job, but she did. So, you know, other than that, she was really good. But yeah, that was a big goof.
I'm like, the moment I said, I'm like,
It is kind of an 800-pound gorilla in the state, so I get it too. Yeah. Thank you.
good morning, everyone. How are we today? We're good and dry inside Orchestra Hall, which is always nice. But for today, we're fortunate that Hans Myers joined us again for day 2 of Chautauqua Lecture Series Journalism and Media Literacy. Hans Myers, professor and associate director for graduate studies at the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University. In today's session, algorithms, memes, virality, what drives social media engagement, and how I can get in on it. Like news, it's easy to oversimplify social media, but it's much more complex than memes, viral videos, and Aunt Martha's green bean casserole recipe. In fact, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry fueled by tech giants who are more interested in exploring what technology can do than whether it should. Hans will share his thoughts on how you can maximize engagement and the social benefits offered in social media platforms. Also, as a notice, my speaker for Wednesday and Thursday of this week, unfortunately, she had to cancel. But, so for Friday, our speaker, Kurt, he is also going to be giving a talk on Thursday. Both Thursday and Friday, they're virtual sessions because he's in Arizona. And then for tomorrow, we are working with Jeanette Keaton on a session for tomorrow morning. So just wanted to give you that notice. But I always ask, I do ask if you please mute your cell phone ringers and help me in welcoming Hans Meyer.
All right. All right, thank you very much. Oh, that's loud. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad to be back again. This lecture, I love exploring the theoretical, the historical, but this is a lot closer to what I do as a professor each day, trying to teach students how to use social media and how to make it most effective to them. And what's really interesting is most of them are very expert at it before they come to the journalism school. They've been using it with their friends. Most of them started when they were in junior high. I know that's when my kids started. But when you ask them to apply it in that journalistic context, to apply some of those principles that we talked about yesterday, about verification and storytelling and audience building, they clam up. They don't see that as a possibility. So that's what we try to open them up to see. And a lot of it there is some background, some history. In my intro, I talked about tech giants and going into their philosophies. I took a little bit of that out of there because it was just so darn depressing. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen when they testified before Congress and talked about their goals. But there is a little bit of background on that. So let's just jump right in. All right, oh, there we go. I did write a textbook about social media. It's called Social Media Strategy, about personal brand building. It's an online textbook, so you have to access it through Top Hat, but it's something that I've been really interested in. I had a great mentor in graduate school back in 2004, and he came to all of us as students and said, there's this new thing called Facebook. You can only get on if you have a .edu address. You all, because your graduate students have that address, you need to get on there. And so we did, and I want to say that began a love affair, but it didn't. I mean, it's Facebook. It's a very useful thing, especially some of the work that I do now, like recruiting students, promoting the journalism school. It's a great way to reach parents It's a great way to create events, bring people together that way. But it's also, the death of us sometime when you can't figure out why this is going, or, when people pull up your page and put inane comments on there. But I have a lot of experience with social media. My next kind of point here, I had said on there dabbler. I mean, I feel like I'm more than a dabbler. Like a lot of you, I don't post as often as I should probably. I don't think about it. I just was preparing for this lecture and I'm like, I should take a couple of pictures for Instagram. It's kind of one of those things you don't think about until you're in the moment. And I know I should do more of it, but I do feel like I get a lot through some of the consulting work that I do and some of the things I do. And I preface that by saying, yeah, I'm a big geek, all right? That's me and my son just, just 2 days ago, we were at the Origins Game Fair in Columbus. A lot of the people that I work with actually are in the board game industry. And so, yeah, we've been lucky to work with Brotherwise Games, Cephalofair Games, and then I've done extensive work with the Snag podcast, trying to promote them on social media and help them build an audience that goes through. So I feel like even though I don't have enough, I should do more of my personal branding. I have a good background of branding with other companies. Okay. All right, come on, you dumb thing. Okay. So social media, all right, how prevalent is it? Well, I started last week with a poll, didn't quite work, so I'm like, all right, let's just pull up the numbers, okay? But Pew actually did one of their fact sheets, I think in March of this year, and said, all right, and this one is focused specifically on those who use social media for news, okay? So, well, I guess maybe this was 2023, sorry. There was another study they did more recently, but yeah, it's increasing, okay? Those who are using social media sometimes has gone up, but it's interesting how it's actually kind of stable. The nevers, I don't know if we're going to convert those people. The oftens actually went down, which is kind of interesting, okay? To kind of really understand that, it's important to kind of break it down a little bit more, which is what they did. Oops. All right, look at men, women, ages, education levels, racial things. And then I like that they added kind of the political spectrum on the bottom there, helping understand. I think, there's a lot of assumptions about, who uses social media, who does certain things based on political party. And this actually kind of, I think, gives you some hard, fast data to understand that. Okay, and I know there's a lot there. I have a link to this in the presentation if you want to dive into it even more. Pew, like I said, does really good research. It's hard to boil down what they're doing in just simple graphs, so if you get a chance. But they did have one other thing that I thought was really interesting. They looked at the rise and maybe fall of certain platforms, okay? And I kind of preface this with, this idea of, are these even social media? Sorry, what was that? Yeah, TikTok's doing okay, yeah, how many of you are on Twitch? Just show of hands. What, no one? Come on, Twitch. You're big gamers out there, right? No? Okay. Yeah, I mean, Twitch is actually a really interesting platform. It's owned by Amazon. It's mainly known, but that's where people go to stream themselves playing video games. It's not limited to that. You can do other things. We've experimented with doing newscasts on Twitch. Strangely enough, though, Amazon makes it really hard to do that. They've really set up Twitch around these creator communities, and if you're doing anything that's not considered by them creative, it's hard to get on there. So, Nextdoor, do we have anybody on Nextdoor? Okay, yeah, Nextdoor is kind of, if any of you were familiar with like Patch, Nextdoor kind of sprung up from the ashes of Patch. Patch was actually a big corporate initiative to try to create small community news organizations on the web. They had a couple of pretty successful organizations here in Ohio, but with big corporate funding, when it didn't make tons of money within a year or so, they kind of shuttered it. All right. Nextdoor is very much similar, but more locally focused, and I don't think they're nonprofit, but I don't think they're not a big corporate thing, so they don't have quite the same thing. So, yeah, you had a question? Okay. That's right. That's right, yeah. And I think that's really the challenge, right? Of weighing through, is this coming from a legitimate news organization? Is this just a link that someone is sharing? Where does that link come from? You know, who, I guess you know who's posting it, but you know, there's so many like fake accounts and things out there, it's hard to even know who posts things sometimes. So, and I think that's why, you know, Facebook, I think, I don't get Meta. I mean, when I said I was not going to talk about the companies a little bit, but, you know, I mean, Meta owns everything, right? They own Facebook, they own Instagram. Now I just saw an ad last night for WhatsApp. I mean, I've had WhatsApp for a while because it's really popular in Europe. So last time I traveled over there, I downloaded it. But, you know, people here don't really use it. And now they're pushing that, but they still have Facebook Messenger that's really popular. It's like, what are they? I mean, wouldn't, as a business, you want to consolidate some of these things, you know? That's a good point. Yeah, and that's definitely what you're seeing like with Facebook and Instagram. As people are leaving Facebook, they're going more toward Instagram, especially among young people. When we talk to our students on campus, Instagram is the most used social media source that they use, even more than TikTok. You know, I mean, and TikTok definitely is making inroads, but yeah, at least our journalism students like Instagram. So. No, TikTok is owned by, what's the actual name of the company? ByteDance, thank you, yes. Which is actually a Chinese company. That's why, you know, there's a lot of talk that the federal government might make them sell to an American-based company.
They have to within a year.
Oh, they have passed that?
Oh, yeah, they passed that.
Okay.
Whether it lasts is a question.
Right, right.
But it's fear that a Chinese company will hack your computer.
Right, yeah, and
Fine, but a really important computer somewhere.
yeah, yeah.
Don't,
Well, yours is important, you know. The pictures of your family and things, you know. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I was I mean, I consider myself a defender of technology, you know. I mean, my stance with TikTok for a long time was, look, Facebook is gathering all that data about you anyway, probably more. You know, why don't we regulate Facebook the same way? But I think it was the Washington Post actually had an article very recently where they got some insiders on TikTok, talked to them about what they were using the data for, and it was pretty startling. I am not using TikTok anymore, but it's up to you. I mean, you can. So yeah, it's crazy. All right, but yeah, I mean, social media is growing. You know, do we have enough hours in the day for all of these platforms? You know, who knows? I mean, there have been studies. I remember actually back in the day when I first started as a professor, we did some studies about newspaper readers, you know, where they're going. And what we found that was really interesting is they may not be reading newspapers, but they're reading the web, and they're reading that more, and they're on social media more. So the time they spend with the news is actually more than when they just were reading newspapers.
it's in their pocket now.
Right, right. So that's a positive sign for sure. Yeah.
What are they using the information for, as you said?
That is a good question. Hey, you know what? I paid you to say that because it's kind of, we'll jump right here to the next slide, okay? Actually, let's just jump. Let me get through all this other stuff here quick. But yeah, I have a specific slide about that. The New York Times actually just last week released their brand, what do they call their Consumer Insights Panel study, where they interviewed more than 1,200 people across the nation about what they're using social media for, why they're doing it, and they have some actually pretty concrete answers about what that is. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of preface this by saying, you know, just like I did last week, or just like I did yesterday, giving you some background on the media, that it's started out biased. Well, the internet in general started out as social. You know, the idea was to connect people across distances. The idea was to share information easily. You know, Tim Berners-Lee here, whoops. You know, the CERN scientist who developed HTML, which is kind of the markup language that powers websites. And he said over and over again, you know, I was just tired of getting these boring messages from my friends on this internet, so I designed a way to make them look better. I mean, that's all he did. And then he released it for free to the world, and now that's what powers the internet. Now, I saw an interview with him where the journalist asked him, you know, if you would have licensed HTML, you'd be a billionaire right now. He's like, I don't care. I mean, this was a technology to bring people together. He strongly believed in this concept that we call like the public sphere, right? Of giving people a chance to speak and to talk and interact freely is going to make sure that they come together and that we also have a better picture of what is true and what is real, okay? That's what the internet was really supposed to do. We'll get to a minute, has it done that or not, right? One other thing that I wanted to kind of emphasize with that too is, opening up this public sphere, allowing people a chance to share information, feeds into this concept of what Clay Shirky, a researcher at NYU, calls the cognitive surplus. The group knows more than any one individual does. And by tapping into that group consciousness, you're able to tell better stories, to have better information, to educate people better, okay? Excuse me? Wikipedia, yeah. I was actually just reading something that he said the other day, and he's like, yeah, Wikipedia in some respects scares me, but in others, and this was, from like 10 years ago, but he was saying, I'm just impressed over and over again about how much good information. No, it was not Shirky that said it. It was Richard Dawkins, the father of modern, genetics. Genes, I was going to say gene stuff, but no, genetics, that's what it is. And he was saying, yeah, the internet scared me at first, but I go on there on things that I'm an expert on, and I'm really surprised that it's pretty close to being accurate, more accurate than like an encyclopedia article that I may have written myself.
That's now a decade old.
Right, yeah.
It's got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Bad stuff.
And some, I mean, it's like any tool, right, Right. Yeah, I mean, you could take a shovel and you could dig a garden with it, or you could, beat your neighbor over the head with it. I mean, it's just a tool, right? Hopefully you don't beat your neighbor over the head with it. But yeah, I mean, what Shirky said specifically is, the most important asset of a network is each other, right? And these networks should be designed to connect us in a way that we can rely on each other, that we can build off of that cognitive surplus. Now, yes, how have they gotten that way? Well, Pew Center actually, I forget the date on this. This one's a little bit dated too. I think this was 2017. They haven't done anything like this recently, probably because of these results. But yeah, I've already kind of introduced this concept of the public sphere, how bringing people together is supposed to enrich us all, right? There's also another kind of related concept of the third place. A Chautauqua is actually kind of like a third place, right? It's a place that's not home, that's not work, where you can come together and just talk and connect. And those are really enriching, and those are necessary. Forget the name of the sociologist who came up with third places, but he said these are really important aspects of communities. And one of the things that he's worried about is that with the rise of the internet, with how much that we can do at home. And I haven't seen what he said since the pandemic, but I'm sure the pandemic has made this worse. A lot of these third places are going away. If you think of other sociologists like Robert Putnam, he wrote that really famous book, Bowling Alone, okay, where he looked at American society over the decades and said, America used to be, and even if you go back to like what Alexis de Tocqueville said, right, when he came here to America, he was so impressed that Americans came together, helped each other out, built communities together, and then Putnam was like, yeah, I went to a bowling alley and I thought there would be a league going on, and no, there were just people bowling alone. So they're really concerned about the loss of some of these third places and loss of this public sphere.
The internet contributes to that. I can now sit in front of my computer and think I'm connected.
Right. Putnam interestingly wrote an essay a couple of years ago where he kind of looked at this bowling alone phenomenon. And in his book, he blames media in general, not just the internet, but just media in general for a lot of that. In this new essay, he said, the internet has potential to be a great gathering place, but it hasn't achieved that potential yet. Okay. So in this 2017 study, they asked people specifically, do you think that social media is a good thing or a bad thing? Okay? And do you think it has the potential to become a good thing or a bad thing? Well, 51% were not hopeful. And the two reasons that they gave were, well, human nature. I mean, this really depends on how you see the world, if you're a glass half empty or glass half full. But these people, these 51% said, we're just jerks in general, and we're not going to start behaving well now. Okay. Also, we already talked about this a little bit. Technology is not going to help. I mean, there is kind of this prevailing attitude among Silicon Valley engineers and designers. I think it's best portrayed. I know it's semi-fictional, but I'm a huge movie person. If you've seen The Social Network by David Fincher, there's a couple of really specific quotes in there that he quotes Mark Zuckerberg as saying, well, I'm an engineer. If I can do it, I should do it, right? Not thinking about the implications of what he's doing. Going back to the Facebook that he created at Harvard, rating how attractive women were, he didn't think, that might make people upset, right? So.
It's like dynamite. Exactly the same. Can be used for good or for bad.
Right. And I think that's maybe probably an oversimplification to say tech companies, I think they're just ambivalent. I think you've seen that in the testimony they've offered. They're like, well, yeah, they say, well, it's a tool and it's good or bad, but they don't make it easy to use it for good sometimes, and they make it really easy to use it for bad. And then when it's being used for bad, they're not real quick to step in and say, oh, can we clean this up? I mean, one of the things that they fall back on, and they really appreciate as a journalist, but it also gives them way too much protection. As the Supreme Court over and over again has said, the more that you moderate something, the more that we hold you responsible for that content. So if you don't moderate it at all, we won't hold you responsible. And it's like, ooh, well, yeah, we don't want, there has to be kind of some clarification on what that means, right? But there is some optimists, right? And they said, well, that tech, we have to give them, some credit. They're going to find a way to filter. Even if we just look at it from a purely market perspective, to survive, they have to find a way. People are going to leave if it's just full of, garbage. Thank you. That's the best way to put it, right? So let's be optimistic, okay? And yeah, we'll adjust. And I've done actually a lot of research on, civility on online platforms. And really, even when it's anonymous, the majority of people, I would say 90% of people on the internet are nice, right? Or civil. Maybe not nice, but civil. It's just that 10%, those trolls, that make it really hard for all of us. And it's so easy to hide behind, this veil of anonymity that they just keep doing it, right? And it's really hard to stop them from doing it. So, but there was kind of these middle ground too, where they said, well, we just all need better information literacy, okay? And in some respect, I agree with that, but I want to share with you, okay, I'll get ahead of I always get ahead of myself when I think of things. But, all right, this is that important part that I was talking about. This is the New York Times brand survey study, all right? And this is kind of the rest of my presentation. I've broken down in these 4 areas. So let's look at why we share, how we share, how information spreads, this idea of virality, and then finally, this idea of engagement, right? How do we not just share, but how do we actually use what we share to build and to create relationships and even in the end community, right? So here we go. Here's the New York Times stuff. They interviewed all these people. They used this academic theory called uses and gratifications, which basically looks at media as an active process and says, I choose media to fulfill some kind of need that I have. And then I'll keep going back to that media if I'm gratified that that need is fulfilled, okay? So the New York Times, said, all right, and this actually, relies upon, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? This idea of, you know, once we have the lower level needs fulfilled, then we'll go toward more higher level needs. And, you know, when social media is concerned, I mean, we're really more concentrating. No, yeah, it's not working. Oh, there it goes. Kind of, yeah. We're concentrating kind of more on the top end there, right? You know, love, belonging, esteem, and even self-actualization. So what did the Times find? Okay, really 5 key things, key reasons that people say they are engaging on social media. You know, and the first one is just entertainment. You know, if any of you have teenagers, you know, I mean, I do it too. So I get on their cases for it, but you know, we all fall down the rabbit hole, and you know, we're like, I'm going to watch a few videos on Instagram, and then an hour later, you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do, right? So you know, and I think, you know, as TikTok and short form video is growing, I think that's another thing that we have to really, really be careful of, because it's just sucks you in so well, and it, you know, it draws upon a lot of the strengths of the internet and of social media to make you feel like you're belonging, to make you feel a connection, when those connections are really very tenuous at best, and in reality probably non-existent. You know, if you think Mr. Beast is reading your comment that you wrote on his video, you're probably wrong, right? Okay. But then, you know, there is some defining yourself, some, you know, again, in the marketing circles, we call it like personal branding. This is a lot of what we teach, you know. It's not enough for a journalist even now to work at the New York Times. You know, I mean, sure, that helps, but every journalist is branding him or herself on social media. We talked yesterday a little bit about newsletters. You know, somebody brought up Substack. That's a great way that a journalist can be independent. You know, send out his or her, you know, newsletters. Can even charge. You can track who reads them, how often emails are opened. It's a really interesting platform. Okay, you know, but the social nature of the internet. Well, we want to be on social media to grow and nurture our existing relationships. Okay. And, you know, I mean, I still connect with people from high school on Facebook. You know, I still connect with people from the 2 years that I lived in Montreal. You know, even that was back in 1991. Oh, man, I'm old. You know, but then again, this idea of self-fulfillment. And then, you know, last but not least, you know, to get the word out about causes and brands. Okay. Yeah, and if you really dive into kind of their numbers, like I said, there's a link in there too if you're, you know, really bored. But I mean, they were surprised too how low that was, you know. And you think maybe it's because you get bombarded with so much of that on social media, you know, because of how the social media companies set up their algorithms and set up their advertising platforms, you know. But yeah, that was one of the lower things that they follow. All right. And so this actually kind of prefaces something I'm going to talk about a little bit later, though. But, you know, we think in media that we have to have these huge audiences, you know, that we have to reach 1 million people. Or if we go on, you know, if we decide I'm going to become a content creator, I'm going to jump on Instagram, you know, I need 1 million subscribers. Because of the reasons that we're online, you know, we want a connection more than we want brand awareness. Sometimes smaller audiences are better, okay? And actually, advertisers have said that's what they're looking for. It's better for them to have a content creator with from 10,000 to 100,000 followers, but those followers are very dedicated and engage often with their content and their brand, than to have somebody with 1 million followers, or, you know, who is it now? It's like it's not Justin Bieber anymore. It's probably one of the Kardashians, but they have like 30 million followers, you know, on Instagram. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Yeah.
It's a very cost-effective way to reach the 10,000 people.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, some of the people that I've worked with, you know, I mean, some of the branding campaigns that they've done, you know, for them, it's very lucrative. You know, it's like, oh, okay, $5,000 to $10,000 to promote this game online or whatever. But, you know, for one of the board game companies that are doing that, you know, to buy a national ad, or to, you know, get into a magazine, or even, you know, targeted online ads, it's going to be a lot more than that. And it's even more effective because of those kind of personal connections that they do. So, Okay, so I've talked a little bit about algorithms. It's kind of a dirty word, I think. Really, it didn't start out that way. I mean, really, anybody here, did any like computer programming or, yeah, a little bit, yeah. So like computers work on like what they call like if-then statements, right? When you make instructions for a computer, you say if this happens, then this happens. An algorithm is just kind of a complicated formula of those if-then statements, and it's just a new way of packaging and sending out information. Okay. That's true, yeah. I mean, yeah, computers follow our minds, right? We think in those terms, I think we have some nuance and, it's not black and white as much as with a computer. But, when we add in like machine learning and now with generative AI, maybe computers are starting to think a little bit more like us too, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and again, I'm not a programmer. I mean, I've done a little dabbling on it. I mean, I think you have to be very talented to write a statement with shades of gray. I mean, coders even talk about elegance in their code. But yeah, I mean, it's happening, and so I wanted to kind of, I don't have this up there, but I wanted to, maybe I do. No, all right. I do, yes. This idea of machine learning. My students oftentimes confound that with AI. And machine learning is different. And this is more of what we're seeing right now. But AI is what's making the big jump. Machine learning has been around for a long time, at least a decade. And basically this is that thing that watches what you do and adapts based on that. Okay. So when you're on Amazon and you're like, I want to find a new hat. All right. And then all of a sudden Amazon says, here's some hats you might like. Okay, that's machine learning, right? AI is different in the fact that it actually not just takes what you've done and suggests something else, but actually creates something new. In that Amazon scenario, AI would say, hey, we saw that you like blue hats with ear flaps, so here's this new hat that we just created just for you. And that gets a little, I don't know, scary. It's another tool, right, that we need to regulate. And right. Well, I mean, how does an AI know, what to create for you? It uses databases of existing art, existing writing, existing history. Oh man, I'm trying to think. There was just a really controversial article where, what company was it? A creative company said, okay, Google, you can use our backlog of images and art to train your AIs. Okay, yeah, I mean, that creates, a lot of implications, right? Yes, please. Okay, huh? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. No, that's good. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Artists, though, are very concerned about musicians, people who write books, and, visual artists, book makers. I have friends who've written books that stuff out of their books has been stolen to make these books on Amazon. You think you're buying a book about an expert thing like spinning. But what you find out is they stole some of your pictures, some of your wording, but the information is totally garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let me see. I'll just skip to it here. So, yeah, one of the slides that I shared here is Instagram recently released this video and accompanying policy statement about how they're going to tweak their algorithm. And one of the main concerns that they're trying to address are these accounts that are just grabbing content from other accounts and repackaging it and passing it off, maybe even not as their own, but as like, oh, here's a collection of funny fail videos or whatever. But they're not giving credit to the original creators. And, in this link-driven economy that the internet is, they're not getting those clicks and they're not getting those views, so that they're not getting the ad revenues and the audience building that they might with those content. So, yeah, and they're also, again, I don't know how they're going to do this. Companies have been talking about this for ages, how they're going to prioritize original content in their algorithms. But that's what they say they're going to focus on, What I skipped over there, too, is, Google, they say their algorithm is all just about you and giving you better recommendations and, more important information so you can make decisions, right? Yeah, just kind of like we talked about with journalism. They're like, oh, this is all the decision making. It's like, well, right. Right. All right, yeah, and they just want to make sure, too, and, when we talked about this idea of, smaller audiences are better, or can be better in certain respects, Instagram has said we want to make sure that everyone has that equal chance to get noticed. Again, I don't know how they do that, and that flies in the face of, charging thousands of dollars to be a sponsored post and, to be suggested content. There is some talk about, I think more with TikTok, I don't know, it's all just talk, but, that there's ways to tweak the algorithms and make sure that your post gets seen by more often. It's just, I wish I understood it better, but maybe I don't, because then I'd be really, then I would just go and, be like Thoreau and live at Walden Pond and, not come out, but yeah. So this is a book I read recently called Filter World, How Algorithms Have Flattened Culture. I think the title kind of says a lot of it, right? Because they're just kind of delivering to you, what you think you want, but they're getting that picture from just looking at other people, and so, I really like what he said. He calls this idea filter world culture, this world that's been created because of algorithms. It's ultimately homogeneous, marked by a pervasive sense of sameness, even when its artifacts aren't literally the same. One of the big examples I see of this, and even some of the creators that I've worked with have talked about it. How many of you are on TikTok? A couple? All right. TikTok has a very, almost you could say like meme-ified culture. If a song becomes popular or a dance becomes popular, suddenly everybody's starting to do it. And there's some thought that that's what TikTok's algorithms prioritize. And among the creators I've worked with, it's like, I've got to make a goofy video, doing this dance because that's how I'm going to get attention. There's a creator in Cincinnati called Feli. I forget her full name. Her account is Feli from Germany. She does content about, being German in the United States. She's actually taking the citizenship exam. Really interesting content. Well, she had to do the Barbara video. Because it's like everybody asked for it. And she's from Germany, so she can speak German, so she got to do the video. Now she's done like 3 versions of it because they were all so popular. And she's like, that's not really what my channel is about, but, it's that sameness, right? It's that what the algorithms are demanding, what this filter world is creating. And it's a really difficult landscape to navigate if you're trying to, make your living on a social media platform. All right. If I can, hopefully, this will work here. One of my colleagues at the Miami University, he's an advertising professor, but he studies memes and, just kind of, he actually has a divergence where he looks at like urban legends and how they're proliferated online, things like Slender Man and Mothman, and he has an effect that he describes as the Mandela effect. Named for Nelson Mandela, but in a not a good way, in a sense. It's just this idea of remembering something mistakenly. So I think he named it that because his wife, his wife heard that Nelson Mandela had died, and so she was telling everyone, and she mistakenly thought that Desmond Tutu was Nelson Mandela. Okay. The thing that he talks about is, there's those children's books, the Berenstain Bears, right? So many people think it's the Berenstein Bears, and they have said that over and over and over again. So they'll even argue with you and say, no, no, it's the Berenstein Bears. I've seen it. I know it. I read those books as a kid. It's Berenstein. You know, you have to actually take the book and show them Berenstain. It says right there, you know. But that's what he says is Mandela effect, and it's proliferating on the internet. He says he's gotten into arguments with people over things that he knows are right, but they've just talked about that thing that's wrong so much that they actually start believing it. Okay. And one of the big things that he blames for it is, oh, there's Andrew Peck, my colleague in Miami. One of the things he kind of blames for it is these algorithms, right? You know, here he's talking about specifically about fact checking. If I can play this short clip, oops, maybe not. He was on a podcast called Digital Folklore, where he was talking about the Mandela effect, and he ended up talking about algorithms, and he has kind of a less optimistic view about this.
Point of this pyramid. Exert influence on individual users and on journalists. So journalists are really quick to report and write stories in certain ways and don't fact check and defer. And individuals trust their connections and trust what social media is sharing with them. We have these 3 points in this triangle that are all reinforcing each other in these deeply entrenched problematic patterns. And the problem is, we can fix any one of these 3 points. We can give social media better algorithms, but if journalists are in this environment where tabloids and rumor are still the thing that people are sharing, well, then we're not really fixing the problem. Similarly, we can increase digital literacy, but if the media that is being served to you is it doesn't actually solve the problem. And unless we work on all 3 of these things in concert, unless we think of this as a system, we're screwed. And there's really no way things are going to get better.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I have a link to the whole podcast if you want to listen to it. It's a very interesting podcast. It does some fictional aspects of it. They have some fictional characters. He's actually being interviewed by a cybernetic raccoon here. But his point is right on the mark. And actually, a lot of the content in the podcast is really interesting. You know, applying digital folklore traditions to the internet. I had a great professor in graduate school who taught us kind of to do the same thing. Because it really, like we saw in the beginning, it all comes from the same place. You know, the oral traditions of, you know, ancient societies of coming together and sharing a story has been compared to memes. You know, the same reason why we share the same pictures over and over again. It's kind of a proliferation of culture. Some days I want to go back to the sitting around the campfire and hearing this storyteller, but I know I'm a little bit, I want to make sure we've had some questions already, so, but I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions. I do want to talk about virality a little bit. You know, it seems like everybody talks about this. You know, we all participate in it. We all, you know, content creators like, I want to go viral. You know, that's where I'm going to build the best audience. No, it's not a good thing. It proliferates the same kind of sameness. And in fact, what it leads to is, you know, a lot of the content creators that I've worked with have talked about, yeah, we get a lot of hits, you know, we get a lot of traction, but it doesn't lead to more income. It definitely doesn't lead to more subscribers. And a lot of the attention that we get is from trolls and from people that we don't want anyway. You know, one of the key aspects of, you know, advertising is this idea of finding the right audience and cultivating that audience. You know, virality doesn't let you do that. Just everybody sees it. You know, if you're a board game creator and you want, you know, serious board game players, you know, you don't want the Monopoly and Life players out there mucking up your channel, right? And so we probably don't have time to watch this, but there's a great TikTok video that I had just where she's saying, yeah, I've realized, this is Anne Redmond, and she's just talking about, yeah, I don't want to go viral anymore. And I'm not going to participate in the trends anymore. And, you know, stay tuned. We'll see what happens with it. Hopefully her audience will be big enough that it can continue to sustain her so she doesn't have to chase virality anymore. So I've already kind of underscored, you know, like engagement is what we're looking for. In pure social media circles, this tends to get boiled down to numbers, right? My engagements are the number of views, the number of comments, the number of shares, the number of likes, okay? Can you measure something like a relationship, like community building, with numbers like that? One of the first things that I talk about in my textbook and we talk about in our social media strategy class is no. In fact, what your key goal is, what you should be measuring is, and what you should find ways to measure is your strategy, okay? And your strategy needs to be very specific to what your goals as an organization are. So for example, I mean, for the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism, I helped write kind of our strategy statement for our social media. And we've identified 3 clear audiences and outcomes that we're looking for each of those audiences. And none of them are, likes or views or shares. It's more about organic things where, we hear, well, I guess there is one, we want things shared, like when we have students that do great things, but shared in an organic way and shared in a way that generates, comments and, a recognition of what this journalism school is doing, right? All right, so I did speak briefly about a micro-influencer. I had an example here from one that I've worked with a little bit. This is Professor Meg. You can see, she has 28,000 followers. She specializes in kind of the board game community. She's actually, this is kind of a funny thing. Her signature is she's tiny. She's like 4'9", I think, very slight of frame. So she'll get big board games and she'll sit in the boxes. I mean, it's dorky, but it works for her, right? And it's a way that she's kind of been known. But she has very serious content too, One of the key things too with these micro-influencers is they're really collaborative. Here she's interacting with another board game creator, Danny Standring, and they're kind of just sharing. And they can capitalize on each other's audiences, and because the audiences are similar, they can use that to kind of build their own audience. Right? But these are definitely in that realm of 10,000 to 100,000 followers. But I can tell you, Professor Meg, she's been invited to the World Series of Board Gaming. I mean, these are all things that you probably are like, there's a thing like that? But, within her sphere, she's doing really quite well. And it has to do a lot with, she's gotten the attention of a lot of the big publishers, and they're willing to work with her, and do promotions and things with her. So what does this all kind of mean for us? I always like to give this an optimistic ending, right? And, a call to action in a sense. Like, what can we do? Well, I mean, one of the things that I see, and I even have to teach students this, is, okay, it's so easy to put a hashtag on something. You want to connect with the community, I'm sure Lakeside Chautauqua has a hashtag or something like that, right? Yeah, use those. That's great. It's a great way to tap into communities that already exist. But research those, right? Don't just say, oh, I'm sure there's a hashtag for that. Or, one example, we had a project at Ohio University. We called it Valley Reality. We looked at the Mid-Ohio Valley when we were with virtual reality. So we named it that. And we said, oh, we're just going to use that hashtag. What do we call it? Valley Reality was our hashtag. Well, we looked it up, and after we'd used it a couple times, and we realized that it has already been used, and it was, I don't think it was pornography, but it was not something we really wanted to be associated with. And we're like, okay, we should have researched that hashtag a little bit better. Okay. The other thing that I see a lot is, people just create hashtags. My niece has created a hashtag of all her kids' names and a little phrase. I'm like, nobody's going to search for that. I mean, it's funny, Rascal Hank, that's one of her hashtags. And I'm like, nobody's going to search for that. It doesn't make any sense, right? And again, if you want to find that real community that you connect with, I think it's important to do that research. I forgot to put the link in there, but there's a great free website where you can just type in a hashtag and it'll give you information about how that hashtag is used. It used to be called What the Trend or What the Hashtag, but now it's owned by HubSpot, I think. So they've named it something a little bit different. But I'll make sure to add that link later. All right. Handles. Handles is basically, your name on those social media sites. So like at the end, I'll show you my handle is mostly times OHJProf, right? Ohio Journalism Professor. Use that, right? Instead of putting my name in, use that handle because that will make sure that it's connected to me. And and that's a great way to start forging some of these connections and building on this link economy. Okay. One of the other things that I see really common among students is you shoot a video on your phone. It's like, oh, this is awesome. You just pop it right on social. All right. Not realizing, maybe because of how the site, and I've done this myself too. How sites edit things, how they kind of square things off. You might lose part of it. There might be some text on the bottom that's going to get cut off, or it might have a goof at the end or something like that. All of the platforms actually make it pretty easy to edit your video within the platform. Especially if you're just doing something as simple as cutting off the end or the beginning, or cropping a photo so that it's more square, that it fits on those platforms. But yeah, I see too often, somebody will take like a horizontal video and put it on Instagram or even on Facebook, and it just loses that appeal because of how we scroll up and down, right? And then, like I said, the big thing I think that's really important and that I teach students, and even in our personal use, I think we can do better at, is just this idea of a call to action. We see calls to action all the time. You go to a website and says, oh, subscribe to this or whatever. We don't have to put like a button like that in what we do, but asking a question, opening up comments and opening up a chance for the audience to talk back is a great way to do that. The TikTok video I was going to share from Professor Meg, she created this scenario. It's like, what if you had $100 and you had to spend on board games? What would you do? And there was a great discussion, from her community all about that. And yeah, at the end of her TikTok video, she showed, here's the game that I bought. So, okay. And with calls to action, this is a oversimplification graphic. But really the key of this is just making them simple. Ask a direct question. Give them the direct something that they can do. One of the key mistakes I see students make all the time is, just asking like these big philosophical things. And, or asking for an opinion. Usually asking for an opinion gets you in trouble, but asking for a fact or something specific, like what board game are you going to buy? What 90s video do you remember from MTV or something like that? Those are more effective than saying, what do you think about, Taylor Swift's new album, right? That's where you just wade into, all that muck that is the comment sections of social media. Right? And then, like I said, a couple of resources. My kids make fun of me all the time. It's like there's a meme coming around. I'm like, I don't know what that is or what that means. There's a great website called Know Your Meme where you can actually type in memes and search for them. And there's an explanation, and it tells you like when the meme first appeared. It's maintained by the same people that do The Onion and what's the other site they do? It's kind of an entertainment-focused site. Oh my gosh, I can't think of it. One of our grads is the editor of it. Her name, I can think of her name, but now I can't think of the site name. Her name's Mara Eakin, if you want to search for her. But anyway, Snopes I talked about on yesterday. It is a site that I rely on a lot just to kind of sort through things. Like I said, I have a personal connection to the editor, which really helps. It is, yeah. And yeah, we could spend the whole night talking about that. But I don't know if any of you heard of Storyful. They're actually a company that a lot of media organizations contract with. When they get a viral video, and they're like, do we want to include this on our newscast? They go to Storyful and say, will you verify this for us? And that's Storyful's full-time job. So if you ever see something with a Storyful logo on it, you can reasonably expect that that video is accurate and accurately portrays what it says. Okay. And you can even go on their site. If you go on storyful.video, they have a list of here's some of the videos that we recently worked on that we verified. So it's a helpful resource for that. And then, just to try to keep up on what's going on. I use Google Trends a lot. It's a great free resource. It is Google, so who knows what you're getting. But they have a weird way of quantifying how popular a trend is. I would encourage you to read through their little primer before you jump into it. But it's really great just seeing, like not just what people are talking about at that time, but compared to historical. You can compare it to other things. I'll just go on there sometimes and type in EW Scripps School of Journalism and see like what kind of mentions that we're getting and other things like that. But I like that site. All right, that is it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments and questions. And I think I still have a half an hour for more. So as long as we don't lose the power. Okay. Oh.
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. Way back when my children call me a Luddite. Amazon's about the only thing I use. And did I way back in the beginning accidentally give Amazon permission to save all my information and sell it to other companies? Did I give them permission to do that? And I didn't know I was giving them permission.
Yeah, so the term that they call is the EULA, or the End User License Agreement. Yeah. Every site makes you sign it or click I agree to it. They're ginormous documents with tons of legalese. And actually a graduate student and I did a study of this. What would we find? Like 80% of us don't even read it. Just click it. And this was in an experimental setting. So we think in a real world setting, probably closer to like 95% of us don't even read it and don't even know what's going on there. In this experiment, we actually even gave people some information and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We highlighted, the user agreement allows us to take this information from you, but we're going to give you, 2 gigabytes of free photo storage. Would you sign up for this? And we still had 80% said, yeah, I'll sign up for it. So, and I'm guilty too. I don't read them. So yeah, you probably did at some point, sorry.
One thing you didn't address, I know I belong to a lot of interest groups, like weaving, spinning, urban sketching, whatever. Those groups used to be Yahoo groups. Mm-hmm. And then when Yahoo left, and all those, we migrated to Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of private, moderated groups of interests like that where actually relationships are formed and there is a sharing of information and they're quite cordial, where you might be working through a weaving book together or that kind of thing. And I see that as really useful. And that's one of the reasons I stay with Facebook, is for those groups.
Yeah, and I agree. I wish Facebook would do more with that, or promote that more. Because, yeah, I'm part of a number of really groups that I find very positive and supportive. And, as with my media hat on, I monitor what's going on. And they do a good job of, ensuring that they are, chucking out the trolls when they find a way to pop in. So, but it makes me wonder if those just aren't lucrative enough, if it's, more important for Facebook to generate tons of information rather than, just small but very connected groups. So, I don't know.
At the risk of sounding really ignorant, I just don't understand how hashtags work. Can you explain to me how the function and what the purpose is?
Yeah, and that's not a dumb question at all, because it's actually really simple, but because I think it wasn't a feature that Instagram or any of these sites said, oh, we're going to put in, that was actually created by the users, that I think that's where a lot of the misunderstanding comes from. But basically, a user, I can't remember exactly when it was, but just decided, I want to make an easy way for people to find posts that are similar. So I'm going to use the hashtag symbol, or the number sign symbol, and then a keyword. And so, it just makes it easy to search for that term. And it's just became so easy and so ubiquitous now that it's actually a feature in there. Yeah, just in the search bar for any of the social media sites, it's the same as if you would search for like a keyword, but by putting that hashtag on it, you're only going to get people who have, used that, and they're not using that keyword, unintentionally or something like that. Right. Yeah, and I mean, some of them hide it, but they all have actually an advanced search bar. So a lot of times you can just go to like, I think, yeah, I know Facebook is really easy. I think it's just facebook.com/search or facebook.com/advanced search. I think Twitter used to have something like that. And then not only can you search, but then you can, time qualify your search. You can use Boolean operators, like this term and this term. And yeah, they're really, powerful tools. So, but yeah, they don't make it really obvious where they are too.
The question about Amazon and signing away our rights brought me to this. The European Union has passed privacy legislation for users of the internet. What do they have that we don't have? Do you know?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, so in Europe, they call it actually the right to be forgotten laws. They can require Google to delete search history about you and, posts about you from 10 years ago. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on this, but the only thing I would say is, they have stronger libel laws and more of a focus on, privacy. They actually have privacy laws. The United States does not have a privacy law. The United States only has what they call a privacy tort, which is, like precedents that kind of come together to form a law that, lawyers and judges can refer to, but there's no real specifically spelled out right to privacy in the United States. So there is some talk about, yeah, trying to enact, right to be forgotten laws in the United States, but I don't know, what the progress is or, how they've gone that far. So.
And it has more specific cookie settings that you can choose from. So European companies are required to give you more options about what data that you're sharing when you access their site than American companies have to do. But if an American company wants to be visible on the internet in Europe, they have to comply with the same privacy situation.
I've got a question of something I seem to run into more on YouTube, where creators will, some of them, they seem to take content created by other creators and they'll clip out what they want, and maybe a small portion of their clip is just them talking about it, but then they will run the video from the other creator, and is that not stealing property? Or I mean, it just seems like it would be a problem, but it's every place.
Yeah, I mean, it is stealing, right? It's a copyright infringement. My frustration with YouTube is, and it just depends on, who you are and what power you have behind you. I can't do a cover song of me like playing a Beatles song, for example. YouTube's algorithm will flag that, and they won't take that video off, but they'll do what they call demonetize it. So that I can't make any money on it. If I did have ads enabled, any money would go back to the original creator, But yeah, for clips from other people's videos that they can't easily, tag as this is somebody else's content, they don't. And yeah, it's super frustrating. I mean, and they say, like Instagram, they say they're going to work on that. They say they're going to prioritize that, but they haven't done a very good job of it. And I really think it's because most of those videos are coming from people like you and me that don't have the clout to go to Google and say, hey, at least demonetize these videos. But yeah, I mean, very astute observation. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Just a simple question. Do you have any ideas about what's next? We went from Facebook or whatever, and what's next? Can you tell?
That is interesting. Um, yeah. I mean, I think AI is going to change things a lot. I think, it's already being used in small ways. We had a conference just a few months ago at Ohio University, and it was some of our grads that were leading the conference and talking about how they were using AI. And, they're really using it to kind of streamline the process, rather than like creating things. One person, she was a podcaster, and she showed this great AI software that'll go through and edit out all of her ums for her, so she doesn't have to do that herself. It even had like some generative properties where there was one time where she said March 28th and it was March 29th. So she could highlight that in the program and say March 29th. And it did, and she couldn't even tell it wasn't her voice. So I mean, I think we're going to see more AI content, and not just, there's the dark side too of, wholly AI generated things. Well, yeah, it's getting good. And I hate to say this, but the industry that's really pushing it, and there's so many problematic things with it, is the pornography industry. I don't know if you saw, I forget what state, there's recently a bunch of young men that were prosecuted for making deep fake AI porn videos of their classmates. Yeah. On the brighter note, I guess maybe the other thing that I think that will happen is, it's been a promise for a long time, but we're starting to see it with QR codes, that now they've become ubiquitous. I think you're going to see more location-based things. So maybe if you're here at Lakeside Chautauqua, you go on Instagram, you'll get a bunch of, here's videos that have been made here, and even like more pinpoint accurate. Like if you're at, the boat dock, or, the park there by the boat dock. I had one day to walk around, so I don't know the whole place. But, you might get very specific videos that were shot at the boat dock or at the park, or something like that. It's really all about more individualized, more specific, hopefully more pertinent and relative, but maybe, more filtered content for you. So, the other thing that I talk about a lot too, and this hasn't happened yet, I proposed this idea to C-SPAN back in 2017 because they're really scared about, people are cutting the cord. All their revenue comes from, what cable companies pay them. And so, Twitch, I think, is a very interesting platform. YouTube TV or broadcasting. There have been some really interesting content creators who have done really well on those platforms. I could see major media moving toward that. I think, Scripps News is broadcast, right? You can get it over the air. But I think they mainly started that as a streaming service through like Roku and other devices. So, and they haven't told us numbers or whatever, but it seems like they're doing well. They're adding new talent. They're adding new shows. I could see more of that, like content developed exclusively for streaming and not for broadcast or for, set-top boxes. So.
Just piggybacking off of what you just said, do you think that the local news stations will be able to survive in the format they're currently using, or do you see them having to move to like a TikTok or an Instagram or some other mediated social media in order to survive?
Local news has been able to stay pretty much the same for a long time because of national advertising. On Olympic years and election years, they make their budget for like the next 2 or 3 years. They really do. And yeah, they've been, and I hesitate because that's part of my frustration. I've met with local people. I'm like, you need to really look at some of these avenues. And that's why we started our streaming class, to kind of get students familiar with what streaming is. I think that day will come, that they are going to have to, they'll have a reckoning. But, I predicted that 10 years ago and it hasn't happened yet. So it might be 10 or 20 years, The latest viewership numbers, viewership of local news actually went up by like 2% last year. So, maybe because it's an election year or whatnot, but, or the prelude to an election year. We'll see what happens in 2024. But, yeah, they've been pretty, immune to it so far. So I know it's not going to last forever, but, who knows when that'll happen. So.
I had something happen about a month ago that caught me off guard. During COVID, I did public domain arrangement weekly of a hymn on a piano, and it took off crazy stuff. I mean, like viral, but not viral, but anyway. A month ago, I got a notice from Facebook that a video from March something 2020, well, it wasn't March, but anyway, of 2020 had been flagged because of copyright. Now, first of all, I had to scroll like forever to find out what video they were talking but it made me think, like, are there copyright popo at Facebook, like, oh, we have a slow day, let's go back to 2020. I mean, this is 4 years ago. I'm just curious, like, how do things like that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some tools built into the platforms. I know Facebook and YouTube have them, but for something that was 4 years ago, it was probably what they call these copyright clearinghouses. So like as an artist, I can hire this attorney firm and say, go through the web and find things that people are using incorrectly and then sue those people. Our student media has gotten hit with that a couple of times, for content that they used without permission. And, usually you get like a cease and desist letter from this law firm. And, the university's legal team wrangled with them, and we ended up paying like $250, or something like that to the content creators.
Trust me, I sprung into action to see, like, what in the world, and it was nothing that I considered like I, broken copyright. But the crazy part was, and it said within 5 days you can refute this. So I got my feelers out to figure out what I was going to do, and then I kind of decided, well, let's see what happens. And as an artist, I'm all about copyright, so that's why I was very careful about it. And then all of a sudden, I got 5 days later, well, we have removed your post from that day. And so I'm like, oh, okay, if that's all they're going to do, then okay.
They just removed it? They didn't take your refutation?
So far from any attorney or anything like that.
Huh.
Fair use exception, depending on how old the song is, and you can refute it that way if they try to claim it. And then what will happen is if they accept your dispute, they will release the video. And if they don't accept your dispute and they claim that it's still copyrighted, they will mute it in certain European countries where that copyright is flagged. So that's typically how that works.
Yeah, and the problem is too, Lawrence Lessig, a Harvard attorney and founder of the Electronic Freedom Foundation, he talks about this too. In any court proceeding, usually the burden of proof is on the accuser. In all of these copyright strikes, it ends up being on the accused, right? You have to prove that this song was public domain. You have to prove fair use, as the creator, right? Not the person that's saying, oh, you used it wrong. I mean, and like I said, any other proceeding, they would have to. Why for copyright that's the case? Oops. I don't know. And he doesn't know either. And it's really quite unfair. And I mean, that's the big hammer that media companies use, to put hurt the little guy, right? I don't have the time or the effort or the attorneys or the money to fight something like this. So yeah, most of those strikes go unheeded, and they just, all right, just take it down,
Kind of asking, going on with her, talking about as everything will go streaming, is there a protection in the law for that? I know there's free airwaves, so is it We will always have ABC, NBC, and CBS so that people can get free news or free something. Because more and more, everything is pay. You know, I mean, NBA games are on pay TV, and so there's less and less that is available on what I call a free basis. Just plug in your TV and this comes on. Is there any protection that will always have something like that?
No, yeah, sadly not. I mean, so yeah, what the government does protect the spectrum, the bandwidth, right? But you know, like recently they divided it up again and resold it because digital signals take much less bandwidth. And that's opened up new possibilities for like interactive TV over the air and great things like that. But it really comes down to, you know, is it cost effective for NBC, CBS to continue to do that? You know, and I think that's why we're seeing, especially like live sports. You know, that's the one thing that the broadcasters know people will tune in for. So that's like, we'll put it on one of our cable packages, and people will pay for that cable site. You know, I mean, yeah. We don't have, you know, we just have streaming at home, and I'm a huge sports fan, and I miss all kinds of sporting events because I don't have ESPN or, you know, Fox Sports or whatever, and it just, you know, like, yeah, it drives me nuts. My son and I watched the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals last night. It's like, we have TV, you know. Okay, they had the
You have to pay extra for it.
Oh, okay.
My husband,
Okay. Yeah, I know they have their Friday night baseball that's free. They have like 2 or 3 games every week, but yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hans.
All right, thank you.